It seems so obvious. Bitcoin is digital gold. It's basically engineered to be digital gold. We're the first public company to buy Bitcoin on the balance sheet. We're the first public company to declare it a Treasury Reserve asset. I think it was largely ignored by every other publicly traded company. I don't think there's a lot of awareness or to it. When we did our due diligence checks, we found Overstock 2 or 3 years ago had a few $1 million of Bitcoin on his balance sheet. And that's it, right? We couldn't find anybody else. And so this is off the beaten path, but it seemed like so rational to me. Like, it seems so obvious. Bitcoin is digital gold. It's basically engineered to be digital gold. What do you need in a inflationary environment? You need something that's like gold, but better than gold. You have to make a choice. It was obvious that the institutions were coming, right? I mean, you had you had companies like Fidelity getting into this space just 6 months earlier or whatever. But the fact that we're institutional custodians was a big checkbox. Grayscale was doing good business at that time. So it struck me as being a rational thing to do, but no other public companies had done it. And it wasn't totally clear to me why, although at this point now it becomes clear, right, in hindsight. So we went through that. We did the 425 million. The stock traded up. Bitcoin started trading up. At that point, I started speaking in public, and you were the first person I spoke to.
I remember.
Right? and I'd learned most of what I knew about Bitcoin by scouring the internet and looking at your podcast and reading all of the stuff that was posted, right? And I tripped through all these different things. And one thing I knew from your podcast was you always ask a question, right? At the end, right? You're like, you can ask me a question, remember?
Correct.
Now you get to ask me the one question. So what I remembered about Pomp was he wants to know a book and he wants a question, or he gives me a question. So I'm like, gosh, what question am I going to ask Pomp? And how do you learn Bitcoin? You study Twitter and you study YouTube and you surf the web. So here's what I know. I know I get to ask you a question, and I know Jack Dorsey has Bitcoin in his bio. So the question is, how do we get Jack Dorsey to buy Bitcoin next?
Correct.
Right?
Correct.
And at that point, we're all alone as a publicly traded company, and people aren't quite sure if we're crazy. But what happens next is some bullish things, right? I mean, I thought that when Square bought Bitcoin, that was a seminal event, right? Because one data point is a question mark, but when you had the second data point, you can draw a line. And so that was a big day. When PayPal announced support for Bitcoin and they started moving it, that was a big day. That was a data point, right? Those were the data points that moved us from 10,000 to 12,000 a coin. And at some point, some Citron research studied, discovered my stock, and Andrew left, I guess, said something positive, and the stock started trading up, and then it traded into the high 100s, and then it traded into the 200s, and Bitcoin started trading up, and when we got into the teens, people thought, oh, well, there's something interesting here. So the next step in our journey was, like, in addition to me starting to communicate why we had done what we'd done, the next step in the journey was to go out and buy more Bitcoin. So we started buying more Bitcoin as part of the Treasury Reserve strategy, and that got people's attention. Then when the stock got to the 300 range, that was the highest it's been in a decade, 300. So we started thinking, well, maybe we can raise more money. And so we went back to the convert market, and we were trying to raise $400 million in a convertible debt offering, but it was extremely popular and we were oversubscribed. So we upsized the deal to $650 million. So that was a screaming home run. We had proposed a 32 to 37% premium. We priced it at the 37.5% premium, the high end of the spread. We'd proposed like 1.25% to 0.75% interest. We priced at the low end of the interest rate. So we raised $650 million at 75 basis points with a strike price of $398. The stock had not traded at $398 in a decade. So it seemed like reasonable. If you could sell $650 million of stock at $398 a share, seemed like a reasonable thing to do at the time. So then we took that and we bought Bitcoin with that. So that was, we started out with we're going to raise the money for general corporate purposes. And along the way, the discussion was, what are you going to do with it? And I said, well, I want to be able to buy Bitcoin with it. And they said, well, we should put that, into the disclosure. I said, yeah, we should disclose that. And then they said, well, are you sure you're going to buy it? And I said, yeah. So eventually it flipped and it became, we're doing it to buy the Bitcoin. So that became, in the history of first, right? We're the first public company to buy Bitcoin on the balance sheet. We're the first public company to declare it a Treasury Reserve asset. We became the first public company to do a Dutch auction, which is in essence like an equity issuance to buy Bitcoin, right?